Brian Koppen joins me, and you talk to a million comics, and you also are, I don't know if you know, I talk with Ski Mask comedian, a couple other comedians who've been on your show, and we all say this, there's no one more supportive on Twitter and Instagram than Brian Koppen. It is so
Oh
nice. We're
yeah.
like, does he have time to live a life? Is he dedicated his entire life just to liking all our posts? It makes you feel good. So you're like, is he just pandering me? Is it just my stuff? No, he likes everyone. But I love
Yeah.
that about you, and I love that all the interviews you do, and
Yeah, you'll notice that I don't pander because I on Twitter it has to be original, it has to be funny, or I won't retweet it. So sometimes, like, if you want to promote something on Twitter, for me to retweet you as a former guest, I really have to think it's funny. And so some people do a good job. I think Maddie Smith will occasionally put a joke in the promotion, and then I'll be like, all right, well, let me retweet it, or if it's a video, if it's short enough, maybe I'll listen to it. But a lot of a lot of you guys are just fucking tweeting hilarious shit all day. So why not promote your episode by retweeting your funny? People are going to listen to the Pat Oates episode of Koppen with Comic now because they're seeing this funny all day long on my Twitter feed.
which is awesome and also shows you the professional that you are with this. A lot of people don't think about that. I've been on shows, and once I've been on the show, they forget I exist. I'm done. I'm the ex-girlfriend. It's over. You're one of the few that's like, oh, he still thinks about me.
I can't believe that. Yeah, I guess there is such a thing as like former guest relations, and I do plan to do something with former guests in the future. Like what I'm going to do now is I'm going to see, what comics live where post pandemic, and if if 10 comics live in Greenpoint, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Greenpoint with a camera and actually treat those 10 comics to coffee in their neighborhood, and then in each segment we're going to ask, Pat Oates, what do you think about this fucking coffee? You'll be like, it's dog shit, whatever. But then, okay, what are you thinking about today that's funny? And then you'll be able to kind of rattle off some fresh material or whatever. Just kind of, another opportunity to promote former comics, because I want, for you guys to come on the podcast. It's so nice for you to do it. I pay $5 to $10 or something like that. But one of the things nobody knew they were getting out of it was that their funny stuff would be retweeted all day long.
No,
So it's like, well,
it
yeah, I'd
really is.
rather, yeah.
I do a ton of them. I'm a guest on a lot of shows, and some people don't even promote and tweet their own show. Like, it's so funny how many people have
Love
podcasts,
that.
but like, I'm not going to tell people it exists. I'm like, well, then why are you having me on it? If you're not proud of it, why the fuck would I want to be on it?
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
you interview, I don't think there's any comedians left. I think you
yeah,
did it. I think you talked to every comedian that's ever lived,
I
and a
swooped up a
couple that are
lot.
going to be born next year.
I swooped up a lot of you funny motherfuckers, and there was a couple who they kind of died in transit. Maybe a couple of comics from the scene have died, and I was like, maybe that name kind of rings a bell. And I searched my Google, and that person was on the schedule at one point. And I was like, wow, man, I would have been so sad if he was on, and then he died. I would have felt so bad. But yeah, living and dead. There was over 220 in 2020 as far as comedian guests. 80 of them were in person at QED Astoria, and then after the pandemic, it was all remote. But there's still hundreds of you funny motherfuckers. Like you have friends probably that I'd love to get on there. Ski Mask host has a bunch of people even on that show that I'd love to get on there. And Christy Mayer, of course, she's been on, and I'd love to have some of her guests on there.
Yeah.
So there's hundreds or thousands. I think to recruit guests initially, I scraped my Twitter. So meaning I kind of followed all the comedians on Twitter.
Right.
Anybody with a Gmail, I would email them. But now I'm kind of on Instagram, and like certain comedians were so big on Twitter or so big on Instagram, I might not have reached out to them if they weren't dog shit on Twitter. Like I don't want to reach out to the big names because everybody has those,
Mm-hmm.
and they might not want to come out to QED Astoria or whatever. But now I'm scraping my Instagram, and there's so many. Like I have certain comedians who have 100 mutual friends with me. So like after a former guest is on the show, I will befriend them on Facebook. That's about Facebook has a low bar for friendship, but I figure after one podcast episode, I can be friends with this person. But
Right.
then because I had 230 former guests who are friends, I have certain people where we have 100 mutual friends or more, and we are not, and they're comedians on the scene that I've yet to get on the podcast. So I can't wait to get those people on too.
And what I love about it, a lot of the people you have on, besides their own podcast or their friends, they haven't really been interviewed. And I do like that you do make it nice and easy. It's more like a conversation. You let them kind of control what they're going to talk about. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's the first time they actually are, a lot of them, being interviewed. And you can hear that if it's not a joke, a lot of them don't have the great ability to explain. It's funny how a lot of comedians, if they're not being funny, they have trouble explaining things. And I'm not making fun of them, but they're like, it's like, wow, you're so quick on stage and so brave there. But one-on-one with Brian, you are floundering around.
But yeah, because I tried to get them off material because I don't want to burn material. That's a big one. I don't want them to come on and tell their jokes because not only are you burning material, but then also I can't contribute at all. And
Right.
so what I try to do is say, okay, well, give me a handful of topics that you're currently interested in, and there's got to be a couple of those that I'm interested in because I know that people don't want to talk about my shit, and if they did, every episode would be the same. Oh, Brian is OCD, Brian is fat, Brian is old, whatever. But like with them, it's making the episode distinct, but I also know that they want to talk about their own shit. So that's why I had them propose it. But even there, it's kind of a half baked thought. I had Olga Namer on, it was fucking hilarious, but she had a topic that I thought was super interesting. And so I was like, all right, well, tell me about that. And she's like, no, I'm asking you. Like she actually wanted feedback on like a big issue that was going in her life, which is so funny. Like some of the funnier comedians, they'll actually reject the premise of the question, even though they supplied the topic. Like Mia Faith Hammond, like her topic was losing her virginity because I guess a lot of her material was virginity based
Yeah,
for the
I've
comedy.
actually worked with her before, and she did when she was a virgin and talked
Yeah,
about it. So,
yeah. So I guess she was the virgin comic, whatever. And so I was like, all right, well, it sounds like you lost your virginity. And she goes, what? Like she's like, I'm horrified. I can't believe you'd bring that up. So she almost like took her topic and threw it right back in my face as if, Brian, what are you prying for? It's like, no, this is your topic. So
yeah, but okay, and I'm not doing this to make fun of her. I'm not just using that the example right now to say this. In comedy, a lot of times when you first start off doing it, some comedians will have like this awful intro they need to do their jokes. Like I've watched it be so bad that like one show I did, and this was terrible to do. This one older black comic asked a young white comic to call him the N word when he brought him
oh
up, and he's like, "Dude, I don't want
no.
to do that." He goes, "No, it's funny, it's cool, whatever." And so the guy went up and he didn't say the whole word, but he said enough of it. And of course, the guy comes up and goes, "I can't believe you'd say that. You're such an," and yells at him and uses and afterwards goes, "Oh, it's just part of my act." It's like, no, you just ruined that guy. Like
Yeah. Wow.
maybe she
Who the
was
hell
doing
would
one of
I
those, you say this so I can be appalled. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but yeah, who would build their act on that? Because what person is ever going to introduce like, here's this N word? It's like nobody would ever do that. You're taking your life in your own hands at any of those clubs, right?
They stopped that at auctioneers. I think, I think that's when that ended.
Oh, it's just like, well, they used to do that when I was coming
Yeah,
up.
that'd be back in the day. And a lot of it was like comedy in the same regard. You'd have credits and intros. This guy's
Yeah.
from the Amistad, ladies and gentlemen. Like they would do that, but it was a different time.
So he was an older black dude. So he came up through that. Like it was an older black guy who kind of wanted that setup because
Yeah,
maybe
but
he
he's
got it
also
back in the day.
performed enough to know we're not doing it.
Yeah,
I think
God.
he just wanted to see if he could fuck with somebody. And also, a big problem for a lot of comedians, no matter how long they do it, a lot of them don't know how to start their set. And a lot of them think that because of that, they need something to happen so they can get moving. They can't just go cold. And
Wow.
one of the big strengths for the good comedians is that you can walk up in any situation. And if you can't, you try to build an intro or have crazy music or people that are like having weird stuff going on or wearing a wacky out or dumb shit. Where like, if you're good at comedy, you shouldn't need that. So maybe
Yeah.
this guy needed some kind of
Ugh.
confrontation to show his character. I don't know what it was, but it was tough.
Yeah, like, and even in some of these podcasts, I'm seeing that some of the better, like Bill Burr or whatever, or even Jerry Seinfeld, they're doing stuff where they're rejecting premises of questions or whatever, and it's getting confrontational to the point where somebody like Theo Vaughn and this Ethan guy from E4, which is a big podcast, I guess, they kind of got together and commiserated about how Bill Burr was a little bit rude or whatever, and I think it's because and I saw it, and Theo Vaughn was a little bit out of line there. But I think it's when you're Bill Burr, you can find it like comedy can be tucked anywhere, including the premise of a question. And so by attacking the premise of a question, not only can you find some humor there, but also then you get more original. Because like if you're Bill Burr and you've been answering the same 20 questions about F is for family, you're like, I kind of need you to change the question, or else I'm going to give the same answer that everybody else is going to see 19 times today because I'm gang shooting these interviews. So it can
Okay,
lead to
but
funny, it
but
can lead to
devil's
original answers.
advocate, we as comics perform the same act for the most part every night. It's in different clubs, it's to different audiences, but it's the same act for the most part. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So therefore, you have to make it seem fresh and the
Oh yeah.
same, even though you
Yeah.
have a new audience. So sorry, Bill Burr, that you have so many fucking awesome shows that you have to promote. Boo hoo, that you have to answer a question about a cartoon that everybody fucking loves. Wow. To go on Rogan and promote whatever the fuck you want anytime in between helicopter flying, answer the fucking
Yes.
question. You know what I mean?
I feel so bad because I mean these guys. Theo Vaughn was like, yeah, I really knew this guy in real life, and I looked up to him, and I ran into him, and gave me a lot of sound advice. And it's like if you didn't know that Bill Burr might be a little bit abrasive or edgy during his interview, maybe you haven't watched his 15 specials. You know?
I think when you're a comic interviewing, not myself, but I know some comics who start to think, well, they're comics like me. So in real life, they're like, I'm not really this person on stage.
Right.
But there are certain comedians like Bill Burr who I've never met him or anything, but when you watch him and then you watch interviews, and I know people that know him, that's who he is on stage and off, 100% the same guy. He's going to have irritable days and he's going to have something. And he also, his podcast, he talks to himself for an hour or so every day. So he's not good at talking to people.
Yeah, he needs that rant every day.
Is talking and everyone's shutting up.
And I think Seinfeld's probably the same way. So maybe there's just bad examples of people
but at least
who are
Seinfeld
just like this.
Dominated the sitcom world and learned how to play off other people.
Yeah.
Burr, Burr's, yeah. I mean, when he does act, he's either going with Yoda, who's not like, a real person, or cartoons, which aren't real people. Like, he's not real. Even and he's in that, you're not watching The Mandalorian and going, oh, it's a character. You're like, oh God, Bill Burr's in space. Like, it's Bill Burr in space. It's not some character. He has a Boston accent and he's in space.
Yeah, he blended right in. I didn't notice it was Bill Burr.
Could tell. Red cheeked Boston guy getting snarky, going, what the fuck? Like,
but I guess I guess confrontational can be funny. Like I had Greg Stone on, and he's just
brilliant. Brilliant writer,
God, yeah,
hilarious, and one of the nicest fucking guys you'll meet in comedy.
Oh, dude, and I'll admit something, that I don't know anybody at all before they go on. And the reason why I don't is because, first of all, I want their funny to be fresh. If I know their act, I'm not going to laugh at a single fucking thing they say if they ever do a joke. And so it's better not to know people. But the reason why I did it is because you schedule 16 people for a cancel. So you're like, I don't want to fall in love. I don't want to like learn about this. Like back in the day, I used to learn about the guest and shit like that. And then they'd cancel and I'd be like, why the fuck am I learning about that guest? And so these people come on and I don't know them. And so I get to know them through the interview and then also retweeting their stuff. So that's another reason why I retweet, because I see you guys, it's funny. And some of that, like a Pat Oates original funny tweet, I'm like, that's, first of all, that's funny, but that's also Pat Oates. So not only going to retweet that, I'm just going to have a smile on my face while I do it, because, but sometimes like, so I see these consistently funny voices coming out of particular comedians. And when they hit something that's not them, I'll be like, 20 other people could have told that joke. Yeah. Maybe I won't retweet that, but luckily 5 seconds later, they will have done something funny too. But Greg Stone, like I didn't know him going in. And so like Joe List had just come out with that YouTube special. And at the end, he had that list of thank yous. Yep. And Steven Rogers was on there, who I've had on, and Greg Stone was on there. So I was like, Greg, it sounds like Joe List, thanked you on his Joe List list. And he was like, Steven Rogers too. And then he was talking about Steve. He just started fucking riffing on the fact that Steve Rogers was a murderer. And like, he thought I was like, if he would have said anything else, I would have been a little bit concerned. Like, oh no, he's problematic with women. I would have been like, dude, what are you talking about? I don't know anything about this. But because he went to murder, I just stuck with it. I just laughed my ass off. But he also is like, oh yeah, he's always talking about killing. And you notice he never talks about it in terms of a comedy club. Like he's talking about, like, he just did a whole huge riff on Steven Rogers being a murderer simply because I brought up the Joe List. And that's when I love that's a lot of times why I clip.
Well, and if you know Steve Rogers, he's a very clean comedian.
Oh yeah. And
has that boyish look where when you watch like those documentaries making a murderer, it's like they look like Steve Rogers. So and also he has the Captain America. It's all that shit working against him, and it is one of those things where that's Greg's humor. And Greg and Anthony DeVito and guys like that who all work together and stuff, they can just roll with a premise. Like, you give them one little thing and they'll have fun and they'll beat that dead horse and you're like, revive the horse and they keep beating it.
Dude, and that's why I'm so glad that like he can't, like those moments are so precious, and that's why I clip those moments. Like every clip that's on Instagram, Koppen With Comic, like it is the person being funny. But if anybody notices, that was a funny that was made up in the moment. Like that was something that came out of a topic that we both came up with or whatever. And I was like, wow, this is something that nobody will hear elsewhere. And that's why I clip those things. I always want the person to look good, but I also want it to look good that he is riffing on something that nobody can hear anywhere else. And even with Steve Rogers, he was the first guest I've had, and I had no fucking clue he was on like Colbert and shit like that. But the first question out of my mouth was like, it's you're touring with Regan. That's cool. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, does he still have the OCD joke? And he's like, oh, he's got that. And I was like, yeah, that was the first joke of his recent set, and I turned it off. And so like I had almost badmouthed his benefactor. Like I had badmouthed like the person he's fucking touring with. And so we spent the whole episode almost like defending Brian Regan. He's like, well, if you had kept the thing on, you'll notice that it's not a cheap shot. He doesn't take cheap shots and shit like that. But that was my first question of the first interview out of 230 was pretty much like dissing Steven Rogers' benefactor. I felt so bad.
Fuck him. We can all take, that's like defending him. Like, whatever, you got your shit out of it. You got your work. It's fine. My kids hate Brian Regan. I grew up loving him, but they're like, Dad, what is he, retarded? He's like, everything is like, "Doober, doober, doober." I'm like, no, these are his jokes too. He's like, he just makes dumb noise. He's like Scooby-Doo,
Yeah.
but a person. I'm like, no, he's brilliant. He's like, no, he's not. He goes, he's just dumb. And he just says purple a lot. And I go,
Yeah,
it's
some of that must be in context because in the same way, I'd like I look at you, look at something like Steve Martin, you're like, is that funny? And it's like, well, at the time it was. And even with like Dustin Chafin, I was talking about, I was like, you're a big name. I always wanted to ask a big name. That's like, what the fuck is up with George Carlin? Like, everything I turn on of his seems like it's dated or whatever. And he's like, well, some of it's fucking, some of it's dated. And we ultimately called him the Scarface of comedy because Scarface is, of course, everybody's got posters on the wall and
right.
T-shirts and say hello to my little friend. And then but you watch it again, and it's fucking dated as hell. And like, and so like somebody like George Carlin, he's nowhere near my Mount Rushmore because it's like everything you watch seems to be dated. And so in that situation, he gave me an album like "You Are Diseased." He goes, "You Were Diseased" is a good starting point for you. But I guess if you're like the comics on my Mount Rushmore are just all current people were just slaying, quantity of quality Netflix specials, and somebody like George Carlin, of course, would fall short.
Do you, in your taste of comedy, do you like a message in your comedy, or do you like just to laugh for the most part?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I think
Carlin is thought provoking. Carlin is ranting. Carlin, if he was alive today, would be the most annoying person on Twitter of all fucking time. Him, John Lennon, they would be annoying as shit. I'm happy they died because like those people on there would be so fucking annoying every minute. It's nice that we can look back and think when people say like, "Oh, I wish he was alive during the Trump." Like I don't, because then other people got to shine. Chappelle got to become that guy, and he needed to be that. Carlin needed to go away so someone else could rise and be the voice of the people.
yeah,
Carlin
that,
might not have been at the right time of the age to be able to do that. I enjoy some of George Carlin. I do like ranting. I do that a lot in my act. But at the same time, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to have an opinion on that. I want to just laugh. I don't want to have to go, is this a view of mine? And therefore, can I laugh at it or not? And if I laugh at it, does that mean people think that like I believe in these thoughts? I don't care about big fucking business or God. I just want to fucking chuckle. You
yeah,
know?
and I guess that's the thing. Like message comedy can get dated because if the message has, he's one of the people, and I think I said this on the Dustin Chapin episode, where it's like because he said those things evolved in that manner, and so he's almost embedded into the fabric of society. But it's kind of baked into the pie, where you're like, yeah, I already ate that meal like 5 years ago. Like that message has already been parroted by 4,000 people after Carlin, so it's almost like he is suffering from his own fame or something. Like he got his message out so successfully that now it's like, you seem redundant, you seem like a broken record. And I guess Seinfeld's the same way, where you can be a victim of your own success. Like I said with Alana Altman was on, he's just a funny joke writer. Like I asked him, can you like somebody's comedy product without liking their stand-up comedy? And because that's how I feel about Seinfeld. Like I love Comedians in Cars. That's kind of one of the reasons why I did my podcast. I love Seinfeld, of course. I think Comedian, the documentary, was great with him and Orny Adams. But because he talks about how comedy is so hard, he talks about that so much. Like, oh, it's so hard to get up there because he would throw out an act, and he made a whole documentary about the act being hard to start from scratch. Like then it puts a lot of pressure on, well, his comedy better be good, because if you watch, 4 specials of Bill Burr or Kevin Hart or, Louis C.K. or Liza Schlesinger or, Gaffigan, like they're putting out quantity of quality specials without bitching about how hard it is. So it's almost like, well, he's the only one telling the truth about it being difficult, but I also don't love him as much, and he doesn't put out as many wonderful stand-up comedy specials. So I think he's almost a victim of his own honesty, and that's kind of why I like his comedy product, because you watch Comedians in Cars, and you're like, these are just two people riffing, and like I didn't think I could, because I was like, I'm not a comedian. Like, how am I going to riff with comedians? And then Theo Vaughn said something like, it's not like this is not a comedy podcast. And I was like, holy shit, I can riff with comedians, but if it gets serious and it gets interesting and open and honest, I can go there too. So a non-comic can get with a Pat Oates and just have, either riff or really, just kind of learn something from
We
them.
can just have a conversation.
Oh yeah.
And a real life conversation is just about, you start off with a little laugh, a little thing that break the ice, and then you get into shit. And then sometimes you laugh off that, and sometimes you cry a little bit, and that's what you do. But getting back to the Seinfeld part, that's what I love about comedy. You can watch I can say one comic's my favorite, and you can say one comic's your favorite. Now I could hate your favorite, you could hate mine, but if you're a fan of comedy, you can't say they're not funny. And that's what I hate. If we know who they are funny. They're just not our cup of tea. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
They've done enough for agents and managers to invest money in them
Oh
and,
yeah.
and to make sure that they're out there making money and touring the country. So therefore, they are good.
Yeah.
But when someone like Seinfeld keeps doing the same thing to the point where he becomes a caricature of himself, where everyone just does the voice, like, who are they? Like, he doesn't sound like that. He doesn't always say that, but he's become that, like Foxworthy and Redneck and all that.
Yeah.
But when you watch them do something that isn't the caricature, it excites you. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like when Bob Saget, when people didn't know he was a comic, people just knew him as Danny Tanner, right? A
Yes.
lot of the world knew him as Danny Tanner. And then
Yes.
when they found out he was a comic and he was filthy and nasty and talked about having sex with the Olsen twins when they were children, people were like, what the fuck? This is great. And it's not a good comic. Saget's just filthy and gross. I don't find him funny at all. He's just disgusting. But people enjoyed it because it was so different.
Yeah.
Jerry having a conversation and talking to his peers, or I mean, if you watch the show, no one's his peer. He makes sure they understand they're a touch under, but it's okay. But even Eddie Murphy, they're like, yeah, I've done this too. It's all right. But okay. But at the same time, you get to see him not be that. Not everything
Yeah.
is a clever word joke. But
Yeah.
you also get to see the brilliance and the respect he has for comedians by talking to them as his peers. And
Yeah.
that's why I enjoy it. I enjoy
Oh, yeah.
that show more than I enjoy his act too. But 20 years ago, I thought his albums were amazing because it was
Yeah.
still newer to me. I
Yeah.
wasn't a huge fan of the show, but I'm not a huge fan of sitcom. I mean, I like a stand up or whatever. The show was, I mean, obviously a brilliant show, but I liked his stand up because I was like, oh, wordplay, it's a
Yeah.
focus on one thing. But then now it's just like you've done it all. We get it. Same thing with
Yeah.
Gaffigan. It's like we get it. It's a hot pocket. We
Dude,
got
he had like Gaffigan lost me for a second there. Like he was food into digestion. It was like, oh, why don't I just take the hot pocket and put it in the toilet, because that's what's going to happen. Like his special started getting like that. And I thought his final one, he took a big dip. I thought it was maybe because his wife was sick, like she had that brain thing, and so I think she's a writing partner to the extent where I was like, maybe he just can't do it by himself. But then he came out with those couple things where he did like a 10-minute bit on horses and ponies and shit, and I'm just like, fuck yeah. Like I think Luke Thayer said something like he thought we got used to a cadence of a comic to the point where it's affecting our laughs or something. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, I wouldn't start laughing again when he starts riffing on horses and ponies. It's just I got sick of the whole food into toilet. Like I
right.
don't like potty humor or whatever. And so but yeah, like Jerry Seinfeld, like it's an expectation game too, where now that I'm kind of down on Jerry, his recent one that came out, I immediately watched and I was like, yeah, this is solid. It's just like when you see him on the Tonight Show after not having done stand up in forever, and he talks about eating your way out of, pretty soon they're going to be baking our head into the cheese crust and the pizza. Where else can you put cheese on the pizza? You put it in the crust, you put it here. And you're like, by the time I watched that, it was such a tired thing. I bet you Pat Oates told the first, second, and third joke. All the other comics told the fourth, fifth, and sixth joke. And Jerry is like a month late telling the 10th joke. It's like, dude, we're over it. Like
But
observation can get dated
in
quickly.
their defense too, when you get that big, when you get to the
Yeah.
point of superstar where the world knows you, you can't relate to people anymore. It's true. It really is true. If you think about like a couple years ago, Kevin James came out with a special, and I went right to Facebook. Like, this is the worst thing I've ever fucking watched in my life. It wasn't funny because it was a guy trying to tell. It was kind of like if your parents tried to relate to something you liked. Like if you liked Transformers as a kid, they didn't know anything. They just knew one. Like, how about Optimus Primo? It's like it's Prime. It's like, oh yeah, and then the transfer. They're more than eyes meet. Like, oh, that's not. What are you saying? You're not. You're kind of saying it, but you don't know what you're talking about. Like that's what Kevin James. That's what a lot of comics do. Like they're at the level where it's so big.
It's like your parents. It's so fucking funny.
Right. It's at the level where they're so big that they can't relate because they have too much money. They have the world telling them they're amazing, and they're just not people anymore like us. They're not. They're a different level of people. It's that hard. When Ellen DeGeneres had that special con a couple years ago, same thing. It's still the Ellen thing, but like when she's talking about her problems at home, I kind of like the fact that she made fun of the fact that like the 13th garden and
that was about to, because she called it she called it unrelatable, and she kind of not only did she joke, but I think she got to the point where she was relatable. And but I think it comes to testing your material. Like at that point, if you still have people testing it, it's fine, because at some, like Eliza Schlesinger, she was on my Mount Rushmore, and then her recent special, I mean, I've seen all her special 4 or 5 times, 6, 7 times. Like the recent one, I had to turn off 20 minutes in, and I've tried several times. It's because the first 20 minutes were about, it's almost like if you had done a wedding and had been a woman with a bridal party or something, you might have found it relatable, because the whole thing was about, the whole cliches of marriage and all the things you have to go through in the ceremony. I was like, did you not test this beyond, did you just have like your bridal party in the audience when you tested this? Like, how the fuck did this make its way onto a special?
Right. But who is she testing in front of? When you get to that level and you get big,
Yeah.
you're in front of your fan base. That's the
Yeah.
problem. When you're a comic who's, we bring up Joe List, Sam Morrill, Martin Norman, they're getting huge now, but they're still at the point where the world doesn't know their name. You know what I mean? If you just ask a random person on a comedy and they don't know them, but if you go see them in a club, they're going to destroy. They're hilarious. They're incredible. But the audience goes in and doesn't know who they are and just laughs because it's funny.
Yeah.
They don't go in going, "Oh, this is Joe. I'm gonna laugh at it. I know Joe's personality. I'm gonna laugh even when he just says hi because it's funny." Because people get they're fans. They're so excited. They're there.
Yeah.
Eliza got so big so quick. I mean, the one thing that helps her a little bit is that she rose so fast so quick because she won that contest, and she wasn't a headliner when she won it. She only had 20 minutes, and the prize was you travel the country headlining. She had to come up with time. Like, she was not ready for that kind of thing. So therefore, she's still getting into her own. And all of a sudden, you're launched into a thing where everyone knows who you are and thinks they know this personality, and you're growing as a comic. You're like, I can't even change my personality, or I might lose all these people.
Yeah.
That's that hard twist. So to test it out, you got to go almost test it out at places that people don't know who you are. And how do you do that when you're at a certain level?
And I think that might be some of the problem where it's like, because she probably rides her own shit, where somebody like Kevin Hart comes out with a special in his living room. I'm thinking that because he's got a couple of boys riding with him, they almost test it out. They're testing out some of that shit where nobody knows where they are. Like, and so it's almost like at this point, when you get that huge, you almost got to outsource it.
Also,
which
Kevin
is
Hart,
sad.
at this point, Kevin Hart is allowed to tell a joke that is considered hack, is considered a meme, because he's working arenas. And when you're working arenas, it's almost like if you're a fan of football or you're just a fan of watching the Super Bowl. Some people want to watch football every week and know the ins and outs and know everything, and like a big fan of stand-up comedy and wants to watch a brilliant comic attack the stage, like watch someone like Tim Dillon and go, that way he's doing it is amazing. But if you watch a Kevin Hart, he's way past it. He's more than just a comedy show. He's in an arena. He's you know him from movies. You know him as The Rock's friend. You know him from these commercials. You know him as he's a little guy with a crazy voice. He's all these things that he's almost like he's almost like a Walt Disney character in a weird way. So therefore, he can just say whatever, and it's just like, oh, that's Kevin. Yeah, that's Kevin. And he can't go like hard detail. He can't go one opinion unless it's like fun parenting things or something, because he's got 20,000 people he's got to make laugh.
Yeah.
They've all got to get it in one thing. So
but why can't Eliza bump up to that level? It's almost like Eliza's at the shitty level where, if she becomes.
Well, see, here's the funny thing. I don't find her funny at all. And I think she's funny. I don't find Eliza funny. And it's not because of female. One of my favorite, someone asked me the other day, another podcast, buddies of mine to do a wrestling one or starting to do a comedy one, and they wanted to get other comedians' opinions on their 4 favorite comedians. Okay. And Jessica Kirshon is one of my favorite comedians. I think she's one of the best in the world. And when I watch her, it's incredible. She's one of the, and I just saw on Twitter the other day, Barry Ribbs just watched her, and he had said watching her is like a master class for comedians. You learn from her. She's one of the greatest there is. Adrian Appalucci, whose album just came out a couple of days ago, I listened to that 3 times already. To me, it's like female Jeselnik. It's an incredible album. So it's not like it's a female male thing. I don't relate to Eliza. I don't find anything she finds funny. I don't like the delivery. There's a cockiness to it. I mean, and it's not my cup of tea. But I don't like men in that role either. I was smart. I never liked Chris D'Elia. See, I knew he was evil always. Not because I knew he was touching young people. I just knew he just wasn't funny because he didn't even have punchlines. He just went and moved around all weird. Like, that's not funny. What the fuck is that?
He had like 1 or 2 good stories and he ran out. Like, I had Carly Montag on. She's like, dude, how was that guy ever funny? And I was like, it's because he had a story about an orange sweatshirt. And that was funny. And then, of course, he mugs a lot for the fucking stage and camera.
And he was Justin Bieber's favorite comedian. He said that a lot, and it became a thing. Now Bieber's fans all started flocking. When the roast of Justin Bieber, that's why Chris D'Elia was there. Bieber said he's my favorite comedian.
He was on Eminem song, and it's like, I mean, I thought that was funny too. But like, so he's not, he's nowhere near anywhere near the top. But like, Sarah Tolomash is on a pod with Adrian
Appalucci.
And she talk about murdering babies or something like that. So Pat
Oates, you know what? Their podcast is very funny. Sarah,
the Vagcast, right?
They're
the Vagcast.
I think they're married now at this point, or at least
her and Joe List.
Joe List, yeah. And They're two very funny comedians. First time I saw Sarah, I'm going to admit I was on a late show at a casino. I was on the 10 o'clock and she was, I think she was actually opening for Joe at the 8 o'clock show.
Okay.
And I wanted to watch her to go, she gets to open because she knows Joe. Like she sleeps with Joe, so that's it. She's probably not funny. And then I sat there and laughed my ass off when she's a brilliant writer. She's nothing like Joe. Her delivery is fantastic. It's smart. It's dark. I like it a lot. And I really appreciate it. But the two of them together don't do the characters on stage of you. They're themselves in the pot. And I like that. But they're fine. They still are themselves on stage and off. But I think it's even opened them up more by doing the podcast for them being on stage. So they're all good. Just Eliza's terrible. I will make that clear.
and even like when I was talking to Sarah Tolomach, she talked about why she feels attacked by New York City or something like that. And she said something like, man, you fucking, and I have a point here, but like, she's like, well, you get up in the morning, you pack your backpack full of shit and you work, and then you go, you do your side hustle with comedy and stuff like that. And trains break down and bullshit. And at some point it almost feels like you're personally attacked or something. And like that moment of honesty was like, wow, that's fucking cool. And those moments of honesty are kind of what I look for, because like somebody like Chrissy Mayer, if you go in and you research what the fuck she's into now, like meaning, cause she's kind of really entertainingly dancing the line of the whole Trump right-wing thing. It's hilarious. Like she goes to
she embraced the audience she has right now.
Oh no, and I think
I believe that she actually almost I don't know, I know her, we're not like close, but like I believe that she does believe some of those views, but I think she also understands that she has this crazed audience, the loyal fans that are there, so she's smart to tap into their thing.
Oh yeah, but
a year ago she was just known as the one who talked about sex on Compound, and now she's her and Kumi are holding their clan hats together and having a good time. And
so but if I'd gone in kind of knowing these things, like I'm a lawyer, I can see both sides of every issue. We could have I really think if we had gone into depth with politics, I think we could have had a substantive, nuanced conversation of the left and the right and come up with some perfect common ground, because even on the right there's great points and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff right now is pretty hilarious because it's just a bunch of senators trying to run for president. But if I had known that though, and even 5 seconds in, because I thought she was going to cancel, like even 5 seconds in, I was like, all right, it's called Wet Spot Podcast. I don't know. We're going to talk about relationships and sex. I didn't even know. Like if I'd known about her, I would have steered it towards, politics, or because I kind of knew I steered towards relationships. When really we ended up talking about like a dead relative. Like I think her mother recently died, and she was just so eloquent about speaking about that sort of shit. And so, I mean, I love the fact that I don't know about these people going in, because it leads to these real moments of honesty that I don't know that everybody who listened to her 1,000 hours of Wet Spot or 1,000 hours of the 10 other, she's on like
Chrissy Mayer podcast.
Yeah, Chrissy Mayer podcast. Yeah, CMP, right? Like if I listened to 1,000 hours of that, I wonder if I would have got that same level of kind of humane honesty that was really beneficial to me, because some of my family's members are going to die. And so it's just like, yeah, I like the fact that podcasts can kind of break down that wall. The Vagcast with Sarah Tolomach and Adrian, like you really want them to kind of be themselves, because it's like, if I wanted to fire up funny, I would have fired up your album, and I will, and I have, but let me now hear your kind of honest thoughts on why you feel personally attacked by New York City.
Right. But it really is, and I know you're humble with this, but it's a testament to your interviewing skill. The fact that you keep saying, I don't like to dig in. So many comics, so many podcasters, so many interviewers, they over research sometimes. They load up you. Yes, you want to always have questions. On a piece of paper, I have things I want to talk about in case you run out of things. You should always have something there. I learned that from E-Rock when I started doing some stuff with Compound. I never got picked up on it, but one thing he taught me well was have more questions than you'll need, because you might get a guest that gives you nothing.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. Well, you were telling me about that. I guess you were going to talk about the gym, the whole thing, and he had nothing on it. Yes, he had to pivot.
Yeah, that was my buddy.
That's a great interview.
That's an AJ show. It's a morning show in Connecticut. We were going to talk about the beginning of of COVID and all that stuff, and going to the gym. He's like, I didn't go. I'm like, you're the one who fucking said it. And then we had nothing. But like I was getting to, it's the fact that you're just going in, you got a great conversation, because you just allowed natural conversation to happen, and you trusted that the guest was going to do their thing. And you also know yourself enough to know that if they don't really give you anything, you can steer it, you can move it away, do whatever. But if she wants to go here, let's let her go here. Let's see where she goes with this, and we can get something. Now, if someone interviews her now, you're going to hear 20 interviews about the conservative point of view, or her going to DC, or things of that nature, or when she's battling
petting
Chrissy
dogs. It was
Teigen.
adorable. Yeah. I mean, dude, I fired up a video of her like with a row of cops behind her, and I was like, I really trust that she's dancing on the razor's edge pretty carefully. And it turns out she was. Like, I turned on the audio of this fucking thing, and she was like, so what's going on? And the other girl was like, somebody got stabbed. And she's like, what's going on here? I don't know, unless we're playing Red Rover, because the cops were lined up behind her like Red Rover, and like and she was petting dogs and things like that. And there's this picture of this ridiculous dog with all this fucking signage. She's like, I will trust this dog to lead me into the revolution or whatever. Like, she's really dancing on the edge. Like, I don't like, although she knows probably that everybody in the New York City scene is probably fairly liberal, and she she wants to get spots and things like that, and she's going to have to see these people every minute, every day. All of her tweets are fairly on the correct side of the razor's edge. I don't think, like, although she probably believes certain things very carefully, and you could have a substantive conversation with her, and she probably makes perfect sense about most things, like, she's really doing a good job of fucking, like, dancing on both sides of the razor's edge. But what I've noticed is, like, I'm like you, like, you're as a funny person, that you can get up in front of any audience and kill. That you can get up in front of this audience, and even if it's a shit audience, you'll be fine, because you have the tools to do crowd work or whatever you have to do to make sure that you're not bombing horribly or whatever. Like, you're a professional. And, like, because I'm a lawyer and I've been in argument competitions, like, I know that, like, with comics, at least, I can have a wonderful conversation. But that's comics only, and that's why I chose comics, because it's only people with a sense of humor that can talk about the worst, saddest, most wonderful shit and find the humor there. Like, I was in certain conversations, and this is why I started it. Like, I was in a conversation with somebody with no sense of humor, and she called me a know-it-all, and I was like, no, if anybody knew me whatsoever, they would know that I'm talking out of my ass for all this shit. So I need to talk with other people who are talking out of their ass, and can kind of your goal is not to be right. And if I kind of got on a podcast with a bunch of guests who are politicos or whatever, their goal would be, I want to be right. Because, like, no, I want to go on Pat Oates, and I want to, like, talk about just the wide range of human experience, and try to find the funny there without getting my dick chopped off. Like, but I'm putting my queen out there. I don't want to get fucking beat in a game of chess. It's like, no, I want somebody who's going to go there with me. And your guys' goal is to have a funny, interesting conversation, and mine is too. But, like, if I had chosen a different set of guests, I would have been fucked.
Right.
Like, I'd have been right sometimes, wrong sometimes. It would have been the most unpleasant thing. But when you set up an interview with 18 comedians and 12 show up, it's just the best, fucking 6 hours of my life.
Is there any interviews that you've just not put out? You're like, nope, this is terrible. You do so many.
Yeah, no, I think you might have. I don't know if you ultimately put out the gym guest thing, but that was so fun. I'm interested to hear if you put that out.
Oh yeah, without doubt.
You put it out, and you threw it under the bus.
Work.
You threw it under the bus too. Like,
some people said it wasn't the best, but I made it work. I carried it. I made it fun. I got snarky with him. I know him well. And it was fine. But yeah, I have a couple podcasts that people I know that watch regularly are like, ooh, that one's bad. I'm like, yeah. What's wrong with that? Sometimes you have a bad one. And also it tests me to see how I can do. Because, it's easy to talk to someone who's funny or a friend of mine. Now we can just go for an hour and not even realize, well, I think it was 10 minutes. It's been an hour. Now it's a challenge to me to go, can I make this conversation work? I invited you here. Yeah, I can't blame you for doing this, no matter what. If you didn't give me the information you were supposed to give me, I invited you to this talk fest. I've got to carry this shit. My back's going to hurt afterwards, but I'm going to carry it.
Yeah, it's a Pat Oates podcast. It's not the guy from the Gym's podcast. So yeah, it's cool you view it as that, because I was like, oh, you had said something like, you hinted to your loyal fans, like on Patreon or whatever. You're like, this one was a little rough or something like that. And I was like, oh yeah, whose side are you? Like, is it cool to throw up a prior guest under the bus? Like, because to you have real fans and tons of people watching your Patreon and stuff like that, but like, your loyalty is to them, and that's cool. But like, for me, it's always been like a recruitment and a guest service.
To be clear, I have like no one watching my Patreon. Let's be clear. I don't want anyone
so many podcasts.
My Patreon has been very weak. I love what I do. I love doing all the podcasts, but when it comes to the part of promoting and kissing asses to get fans, I'm the worst.
I'm going to do that with this podcast.
People like being on my podcast because I will sabotage a thing. I will say whatever, and that's who I am. Like,
Yeah, I'm totally gonna promote it. It's the first time I'm on video, and I'm like, dude, first time I lost my video virginity to Pat Oates. And I'm gonna promote it like crazy because, like, I think I'm gonna start, going on people's podcasts just because I have some time to fill. But I'm not a comic, and so we'll see if these
I just had
people
Ski
want me
Mask
on.
on my POS show
Nice.
earlier in the day, and I told him I was going to have you on. He goes, I asked him a while back. I'm like, well, yeah, you had to start with the good, then move to the mask. You know what I mean?
That's why I'm thinking about it. Like, I think I recall a couple people at the end of a podcast being like, "Oh, do you want to be on my show?" And like, I think Jonathan Ziegel said that. I was like, "Oh, I'm not a comic." I think he was talking about a comedy show. And then I remember Ski Mask host said that during the episode. I was like, "Oh, no, you got big guests, man, and I'm not a comic." But yeah, I think what I'm going to do is reach out to everybody, or at least put it in the promotion here, that I'd love to be on people's podcasts, especially because I'm going to do the video coffee stuff where I'm coming to people's hood and trying to give comics another opportunity to get paid and get some stuff out there. What was I going to say? There's
Well, one of the reasons, yes, because you promote and you're great with all that stuff, but also I was like, is no one inviting this guy back? All these assholes have podcasts. Every comic has a fucking podcast. I'm like, how is no one invited? So I was thinking about it last week. I'm like, I'm gonna ask Brian, and then I was like, he's has the world. You interview with 18 fucking people. And I had to book you like I'm booking a dentist. It's like, you got 2:30 in February. I'm like, I think I'm available. I don't fucking know. How the fuck do I know? And it's like, I got to do a copay of $5. All right, I'm in. Whatever. It's good.
And I love doing that because I get to know people. Like, I know 2 people on every podcast or whatever. And so it's like, it's nice to see who's clicking up too, because you can start to see all these connections in the New York City comedy community. But like at the beginning, I think Stephen Cohen asked after I got off, he's like, "Why do you pay people?" And I was like, and I don't know.
I wanted to ask that too. We all would do it without the pay. It's cool that you do it.
Oh, cool. Because at the beginning, it was like somebody like Stephen Cohen or Pat Oates. You're like, "Oh yeah, you're a fellow comedian. Of course, I'll be on your podcast. Of course." Like for me, I'm not a comedian at all. And they're like,
yeah, but we're all attention whores.
I know. Well,
we're just happy you're asking us. They'll say what they want. They can pretend. No one's paying anyone. You're the only person paying anyone to be on a podcast. No one's doing that.
Keep that in mind, people. I'm going to pay you.
Yeah. What you're doing is you're covering the pizza afterwards when you're like, oh my God, was I not funny? Oh my God, I'm going to eat this pizza because like I'm sad. I'm going to eat my feelings. I don't know if I did well. That's what you're doing for that.
Yeah, it's like guilt-free coffee, guilt-free pizza. Like, and I think the reason why I did that though is because I knew I was doing it in QED Astoria, Queens, and I was paying a lot for the studio and the tech. And I knew people were coming from Brooklyn. And I was like, is this person going to come from Brooklyn to Queens without knowing me whatsoever if I don't at least cover the cost of like train fare or some shit like that? Right. So at the beginning I was paying $5, and I will not. There was a number of bigger names who were trying to get me to cover their Uber. Like I was going to pay $50 for these motherfuckers. No. Like the minute, and dude, a couple times an agent has reached out. The minute, first of all, I'm a lawyer, so go fuck yourself, agent. Like show me your contract now, redline, and it'll be hilarious. But like certain people that I've never heard of, and I still have never heard of them, even after following the comedy scene. And their agent reached out. I'm like, that is laughably funny. And so the first words out of my mouth are, I think this is a $5 to $10 podcast, so maybe this is not for you. Because if you're an agent, you're taking a percentage. I mean, you're taking 5 cents out of that fucking thing.
See, you're talking earlier about testing your material, right? I think to become a stronger comedian, you need to be able to not only relate to other walks of life, you have to understand how other walks of life think. So I like to do podcasts that aren't comedy podcasts. I like to just do, if anyone asks me on a podcast, I'm going to be on it because I want to hear how I react and relate to other types of people, how my sense of humor, and not only that, just my message and point of view, how it connects. If you do get it, if I talk to someone at the end of the day and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, all right, well, fine. But I want to see if I can do that. So for me, every comedian should be on every show they can be on.
Yeah.
It's dumb to turn it down. And someone who's saying they want $5, $10 are probably getting paid $5 or $10 to do a fucking comedy show. Like, calm the fuck down. Like, I'm not even a New York comic. You always have New York comics. I live in Connecticut. Ski Mask like, I live in Texas, and you fucking at me. I don't give a shit. But we have a New York connection because I had Compound and all that, so I understood it. But I was like, it was cool that you were branching out a little bit and doing that.
Oh yeah, no, Chrissy
There's so many New York comedians. Like, you just go to Greenwich Village alone. There's 1,000 people that call themselves comedian. They fucking aren't, but they call themselves that because they're just like a thing that fits all the boxes. Like I identify as a panda or whatever. It's all fun.
I see you on the road and things like that. I'm like, Pat Oates is just fucking killing it even during the pandemic. Yeah, like Christy Mayer recommended Ski Mask Host and a couple other people that I've tried to add on. Ski Mask host recommended you. After I had you on, I think Barack Ziv, I think he said something. He was like, dude, it's so cool you had Pat Oates on. I think even a comment to one of the posts about the episode, he was like, yeah, he wrote a fucking killer book on stand-up comedy. And I was like, fuck yeah, man. He didn't even, and I think we talked about it during the episode, but it's like, yeah, had I known that, I would have invited you 4,000 times sooner, but I literally knew nobody. I reached out to thousands of fucking people, thousands. And I got,
and they should all be fucking happy and gracious and fucking thankful.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know what? We're all sitting here alone hoping people think about it. That's why we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, hoping people like our shit, hoping people think we're pretty princesses. And you do that. You make us all feel like pretty princesses by inviting us and liking our shit and sharing our Instagram. And I appreciate you, Brian. I think more comics need to appreciate you. And I don't think they do, or they would have had you on their fucking podcast. And take that, Bill Burr. We talked about you. You're fucking bullshit. I'm kidding.
Dude, Pat Oates is the first. He took my video virginity, but yeah, ski mask ghost and things like that. I can't wait to come on there, man. You guys look like a riot. And Pat Oates is a fat, funny motherfucker, dude. Everybody can check out Koppen with Comic, Pat Oates episode. It's everywhere pods are. I mean, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Deezer, FFmpeg, like things I didn't even know. Like one comic tweeted his shit was on Amazon. I was like, really? It's on Amazon? I had no fucking clue. Like
nowadays, if you put it out through the right channels, they'll just put it everywhere. It's
so is this
Chartable does a lot of that. If you click up, if you hook up with Chartable, which is just a free thing, whatever, and go on, they'll branch it out. Then they'll keep tracking. So that's when you see someone share, like, look, I'm 38th in Istanbul. Like, okay, you wouldn't know that. You're just there.
Oh yeah, dude, it's so funny. Yeah, so I'm on Buzzsprout is the one that kicks it out for me, but it's so funny to see. You know, I know Pat Oates' episode on Koppen with Comic. I know that was probably streamed in Washington, Virginia. That's where my one loyal listener is. But also, it's in a bunch of countries and shit like that. And it's in Northern California and fucking Modesto and all these fucking
like Ski Mask does well in Australia. He doesn't fucking fly, but he does well in Australia.
Dude, they love his fucking sense of humor. They just built a studio out there. Have you been out there?
No, actually next week I might be the first studio guest.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so
there's no better studio.
Now that he moved to Connecticut, he literally lives 15-20 minutes away from me. So it's
so why do you choose Connecticut? Because he thought there'd be some nice space for studios, etc., and he knows comedy might.
Well, I don't want to give away too much of his thing, but the other people on the show with him, Stancil and Mead and those guys are from Connecticut and live there. They're not really in New York or Connecticut, but on the line, like closer to New York, like Greenwich area, stuff like that. So I think when he got to hook up with them, started getting them, involved in the Kevin Brennan world and involved in the compound world, he's noticed that, like, hey, I don't really have anything holding me here in Texas. I might as well move where people know me, take this opportunity, this chance, and go do it. And more power to him. He's moved here. He's building studios, and he's trying to live a dream. And I respect motherfucker for that.
Dude, he's got fucking controversy and shit. Like you said, he's in Kevin Brennan's world, and I thought he was. And then, and I think, his episode was consistent with him being pro Kevin Brennan. But then you see all this shit, and you're like, all this stuff going back and forth with all this beef. And he's a
smart man.
He knows beef is good.
Ski Mask is like the Don King of this shit. You don't know what's fucking fake, what's fucking real. He stirs up shit because he knows you'll listen if he stirs it up. And that's an old school thing. It's like an old Howard Stern type thing. Nowadays, you don't want to do that. If you follow him on Twitter and those guys, some of the things you're like, whoa, what? You can't believe you're fucking saying that. But that they stick to their game. They're all. They always say, if you can get it, like I do, they've trashed me before, and I know them all, and I get it. I laugh because, as they put it, you're a good egg. You get it. You know what I mean? That's their world.
Yeah, dude, and I think that he even said something like that, like, should I label these New York City comedians? Like, yeah. And remember, starting shit is good. Like, and I was like, oh man. And me following his Twitter feed after that, it's been consistent because even if somebody's talking shit about them, he will still retweet it. That's compound media way, man. It's like they have so many people fucking buzzing about him. And how's your pilot with them going?
What?
You had a pilot with compound.
Oh media, yeah, right? It's not. People loved it. They received it really well. And then, to be honest, at the beginning they were waiting for a new app to happen, and they couldn't do anything after the new app. The second the new app happened, COVID happened. And because of that, there was no budgets, no things of doing anything. Who knows? I've never once been told there's never a chance it's not going to happen, but I said, fuck it. I enjoyed making the show so much, POS, that I've now just adapted and made it myself. And taken on a co-host, Bobby Tamburo, who works for Compound as well. But I just love Bobby and think he's funny. So he's my co-host. And I have my announcer, Frank, who's a 79-year-old man, who's one of my best friends in the world. He's a dirty old crotchety man, and he does the announcing, and we've had a lot of fun doing it. So
Oh, hell yeah, I can't wait, dude. You gotta yeah, the Pat Oates world is pretty, it's a rich tapestry. And I think, you know, Todd Mondesi also has that thing where he's building out his own kind of, he's such a huge network, been in stand-up for so long, where he's putting all these people in his sitcoms. Like Funny Joe Pontillo is on the sitcom. I'm like, dude, that's what you
I
gotta
met
do.
Joe when I first started. I've known
Oh,
Joe
dude, yeah.
since my first.
He's-
Joe and I had to perform in a strip club in New Hampshire. I think. Yeah, it was terrible.
that
And the
bonds
funniest
you.
thing about Joe doing that is that when we had to perform, it was a Friday night at a strip club, and they just stopped the dancing. All the women were walking around half naked, and all the men want lap dance. They're like, "No, for a half hour, we're gonna do comedy," and they're like, "We're not gonna play any music. If you want a lap dance, you could just whistle." And so Joe goes on stage, starts whistling, no scrubs. He's like humming, like just and dancing. It was. We ran. They gave us a hotel. We're like, we don't need it. We're running away. We're going back home right now.
Yeah, I mean, like he's one of the more prolific tweeters. Where like at the beginning, I almost felt like the official, you know, Joe Pontillo stan account, where I was retweeting him way too much. You know, him and Lana.
There is no too much. I know he'll tell you that too. Don't you dare do that. There is no too much when it comes to the Love You show, my friend.
Oh, dude, and you can vouch for this. I think last night I retweeted one of your replies, and that's how funny Pat Oates is. I'm retweeting.
But I remember what it
replies.
was too, and it was pretty much an asshole reply. So
it was so great. I was like, I hope people are fine that I'm retweeting their hilarious replies, but
I'm fine with everything as long as it's telling people I exist. I'm always fine with it.
Dude, I
so,
love
Brian,
it.
just make sure you plug everything and let everyone know where they can hear you.
Of course, absolutely. I'm Koppen with Comic across all social platforms, and you can check all 230 episodes. All of them were in 2020, so pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
By the way, that's insane. You know that, right? That's insane.
It's not Pat Oates. It's not Pat Oates level, because you have like 3 podcasts and shit like that.
But I don't have 230 episodes in a goddamn year.
Dude, I got the best people on there. I got Pat Oates, I got Ski Mask Host, I got Chrissy Mayer, I got so many wonderful people coming down the pike. But you just go anywhere. You probably can search Koppen with Comic, Koppen, and just it will come up on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Deezer, all these things, and just fucking listen to Pat Oates episode, because you love Pat Oates, and so you want to see him on the other side of the chair getting grilled, and I grill him pretty good.
And I want to say that I am the greatest person of all times, because I asked you to be on here, and the other people are all garbage. So 229 people, garbage human beings. Me, wonderful for caring and saying, hey, let me really reach out and say, come and be on my show, because you're obviously an interesting person. And why wouldn't we want to know about you? We don't get to learn about you, so why would we want to learn from the shitty comics version of Inside the Actors Studio? Why not? You're talking to us, all us garbage people, and you're making us feel like we're stars and throwing us a couple bucks. Like, it's basically like giving us a hand job and a smile, and we appreciate it. So I want to have you back on. So thank you so much, Brian, for coming on.
Dude, Pat Oates, thank you so much.
No problem.